Islam rising in Russia. Russia's Muslims under Putin. As you can see, the grandest mosque in Europe has been built in Russia, in the center of Russia, at the heart of Russia in Moscow. In September 2015, an elaborate ceremony marked the opening of a mosque that promises to be the grandest masjid in Europe. The Cathedral Masjid, the Cathedral Mosque, a sprawling white marble complex with emerald and golden domes and minarets that spiral towards the sky, emerged not in Paris, Brussels, Berlin, or London, but in the center of Moscow. There, it joined a cityscape dominated by the golden onion domes and crosses of the Russian Orthodox Church and the bell towers of the Kremlin. Now, the event took on a special meaning for many of the Russian capital's Muslim residents. By most estimates, and by some estimates, there are nearly 4 million Muslims living in Moscow. This makes Moscow the city with the largest number of Muslims in a non-Muslim country. The celebration of the mosque's opening was a priority for Russia's political elites. Indeed, Russian President Vladimir Putin presided over the ceremonies, signaling the importance that the Kremlin attaches to Islam. In a speech that was broadcast on Russian television and globally, and also covered widely by Russian media, Putin proclaimed that the mosque would become a spiritual center for all of Russia's Muslims and a source of enlightenment, the spread of humane ideas and true, authentic Islamic values. The mosque would unify not just Muslims but people of other faiths in the name of a shared common good, he said, while emphasizing that the Quran calls on believers to vie with one another in virtuous works. Pretty amazing that a Russian head of state quoted approvingly from Islam's most sacred text may come as a surprise to many observers. The Russian federal government has carefully fostered close ties to Muslim religious authorities, looking to Islam as a bastion of traditional values and a guarantor of loyalty to the Russian state and nation. In recent years, the Kremlin has largely succeeded in making Islam a solid pillar of Putin's system of governance, albeit one that's hardly been noticed outside of Russia. The Kremlin has portrayed Islam as a traditional Russian religion, one that lends Russia a special identity and then binds its followers to the Russian state. For the contemporary Russian government, managing Islam and Muslim religious authorities is central to the functioning of Putin's state. Patronage networks stretch from the president's office to regions with significant Muslim populations along the Volga River and the Ural Mountains, where links to clerics help bind the semi-autonomous republics of Tatarstan and Bashkortostan to the Russian center. To the east, such patron-client relations reach the Muslim communities that dot Siberia. At the same time, those ties form an especially important bond with the restive northern Caucasus region, where Chechnya is located, and where the central government has expanded its presence. By most estimates, Russia has at least 20 million Muslims. Since the 1990s, the Kremlin has offered direction to Muslims who, following the rupture with decades of state-sponsored atheism, sought a post-Soviet Islamic revival. In doing so, government authorities have partnered with Muslim clerical circles who shared that goal. The decentralized nature of Muslim religious authority and the ethnic and administrative divisions among Russian Muslims have presented significant opportunities for Russian officials to deploy patronage to establish relations of interdependence with Muslim leaders. Russian officials act as arbiters of intense competition among clerics and at times intervene to bolster the authority of state-sanctioned clerical bodies. Since 2014, though, additional arenas of cooperation between the Russian state and Islamic clerical authorities have emerged, with even higher stakes for Putin. His administration enlisted a number of senior Muslim clerics to legitimize Russia's annexation of Crimea, which Russian forces wrested from Ukraine in February 2014. Since then, Muslim intermediaries from several Russian regions and the capital have been active on the Crimean Peninsula, seeking to reassure the Crimean Tatars, a Muslim ethnic minority, that their interests will be better served in Putin's Russia than in Ukraine. One Moscow-deployed cleric helped to prop up that narrative, invoking not only divine intervention but the more pragmatic promise that Crimean Tatars would now join a larger community of Russian Muslims that numbered 20 million. The tensions over Crimea have presented Russian clerical authorities with an opportunity to position the Russian Muslim community as a model for Muslim integration globally. In annexing Crimea, Russia has sought to establish itself as a state with a special relationship to Islam that has ostensibly escaped the pitfalls that have soured European relations with Muslim countries and their own Muslim populations. At the same time, the Kremlin supports the notion of a distinctively Russian Islamic trajectory. Putin himself has called for Russian Muslims to develop their own Islamic theological school, which would secure the sovereignty of Russia's spiritual space. At the opening of the mosque in September, he affirmed that the Russian state would assist the creation of a national Muslim theological school with its own system of religious education. Muslim clerical intellectuals have declared that Russia's Muslims have the capacity to develop a theological and philosophical legacy for the world. In an October 2015 speech in Crimea, Damir Mukhaddinov, an official of the Ecclesiastical Administration of Muslims of the Russian Federation, cited the 19th century Crimean Tatar thinker Ismail Bey, who developed the idea of a single Russian Muslim community. Mukhaddinov explained that Ismail Bey's reformist ideas remain useful in crafting a distinctively Russian Islamic theology that marries the traditions of the European Enlightenment via the Russian people with the intellectual and cultural traditions of the Islamic world, as represented by Russia's Muslim peoples. For many Muslims who hail from the Russian-born communities of Tatars, Bashkirs, and others, patriotic identification with Russia, often overlapping with a regional identity, in the case of the Republic of Tatarstan, for instance, is the norm, which means that many Russian-born Muslims feel a strong patriotic attachment to the Russian nation. Last fall's Cathedral Mosque ceremony in Moscow exemplified just that. Its attendees included not just Ramzan Kadyrov, Putin's martial viceroy in Chechnya, but also heads of other administrative territories with significant Muslim populations such as Crimea, Tatarstan, and Dagestan. The list of foreign dignitaries to the mosque ceremony included Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. And finally, we come to Russia's Middle East ambitions. Russian Muslim intellectuals have envisioned a role for Russia in the Muslim world that extends beyond its bombing campaign in Syria. Mukhaddinov, the cleric, has argued that the Middle East needs a responsible arbiter, asserting that the United States and the West in general have failed at their self-appointed mission as a single hegemon. In October, Afghan Vice President Abdul Rashid Dostum, formerly an Uzbek militia commander from the Afghan north, visited Moscow, where Kadyrov played host. In December, Russian intelligence officials announced that they were in contact with the Taliban. Commenting on Russian overtures to the Taliban, Zamir Kabulov, Putin's special representative in Afghanistan, stated that Russia's interests now coincide with the Taliban's. Russian firms are even finalizing plans to export halal food products